Welcome to Paskvan Podcast. Please like, subscribe, and comment. It really helps this channel. So picture this. It's the early 15th century, and the world's oceans, well, they weren't highways like we think of them now. They were these vast, frankly terrifying, mostly unknown barriers. For almost everyone, the sea was this dangerous edge of the world, something that kept civilizations apart. But for one empire, Ming China, things were radically different. They turned these same oceans into a stage, an unbelievable stage, really. And on it, they launched this naval spectacle. I mean, it was so huge, so advanced, so incredibly powerful that even looking back now, it's still one of history's most mind-blowing displays of sea power. And right at the center of it all, a man named Zheng He. His story is, it's full of triumph, but it's also wrapped in this deep, almost haunting mystery that we still grapple with.
And what's so compelling really isn't just the scale, which is, as you said, mind-boggling. It's the questions, the big, profound questions these voyages leave us with. Questions that are still, stubbornly unanswered. So our mission today, if you like, is to kind of trace those voyages ourselves. We're going to sift through the sources we have about Zheng He, try to piece together the incredible things we do know, but also lean into those tantalizing puzzles that historians have been chewing on for centuries. Because there's this powerful paradox here, you see. China, at the absolute peak of its maritime power, just decides to turn its back on the sea, deliberately. And that leaves this silence, this huge gap in the historical record that really challenges how we think about global exploration, about who was doing what when. We'll try to uncover how something somewhat monumental could almost vanish from history. And we'll definitely get into those fascinating what-if scenarios, because they really do make you think about how differently world history could have played out. It's a story where, honestly, what we don't know feels almost as significant as what we do.
That silence you mentioned, that gap, it really sets a tone, doesn't it? A kind of suspenseful feel to the whole thing. So let's start our exploration with the man himself, Zheng He. His personal story is just, wow. It's dramatic, improbable, almost unbelievable. He was born Ma He back in 1371. And get this, he was from Yunnan, that's this remote province, way down in China's southwest. Mountains, rivers, not exactly coastal.
Not at all. Deep inland.
Right. And his family were Muslims, descendants of Central Asian traders. So their whole world was rooted in land routes, caravans, totally disconnected from the ocean. Imagine growing up never seeing the sea. But then when he was just a kid, maybe 10 years old, his life completely implodes. The Ming armies were sweeping through Yunnan, consolidating power after kicking out the Mongols. And young Ma, he gets captured. And well, like a lot of boys taken for imperial service then, he was castrated, made a eunuch.
A brutal, horrifying start. Absolutely devastating for a young boy.
Completely. Dehumanizing, cut off from family, from ever having his own lineage. And yet, here's the twist, the paradox. This very act, this trauma, it actually opened up this weird, narrow path, a path towards incredible trust and power within the imperial court, especially for eunuchs who were smart and ambitious. It's just, history is strange, isn't it? Sometimes the most brutal beginnings lead to the most unexpected places.
It really is a striking paradox. And you have to ask, how does that happen? How does someone go from that beginning to commanding the greatest fleet on Earth? Well, in Ming China's structure, eunuchs, because they couldn't have heirs, couldn't start their own dynasties. They were seen as potentially very loyal servants to the emperor. They often acted as these crucial links between the throne and the regular bureaucracy. And Ma He clearly had brains, ambition, and crucially this capacity for loyalty. He caught the attention of a very important figure, Zhu Di, the Prince of Yan.
Not just any prince, though.
No, definitely not. Zhu Di was ambitious himself. He was about to seize the throne in this incredibly violent civil war, the Jinan campaign. And Ma He plays this key, maybe often overlooked role in helping Zhu Di win, helping him become the Yongle emperor, one of China's most powerful, visionary rulers.
So loyalty paid off, big time.
Hugely. As a reward for his service, his loyalty during that conflict, Zhu Di, now emperor, gives Ma He a new name, Zheng He. And this wasn't just a name change, it was a total reinvention. From a captive boy, a eunuch servant from a landlocked province, he's suddenly elevated to admiral, supreme commander. It's the first really astonishing hint of just how extraordinary, almost mythical his story becomes. How does that guy end up commanding the biggest, most advanced fleet the world had ever seen? It just hangs there, that question.
It really does. How and why? Which brings us straight to the Yongle emperor himself, the man who gave Zheng He this incredible power. His vision for Ming China was, it was breathtakingly ambitious. He didn't just want a stable empire. He wanted China to be the undisputed center of the world, a superpower whose influence just radiated outwards. He wanted to send this message loud and clear to everyone. Ming China is unmatched in wealth, in technology, in authority. period.
It was total dominance he was aiming for.
Exactly. And his strategy had multiple layers. First, he revives this old tribute system. The idea was distant lands send envoys, they bring gifts, they pay homage. Basically, they publicly acknowledged China's supreme position. But it wasn't just about bowing down. He wanted trade, too. Exotic goods flowing into China, sure, but also knowledge coming back and, prestige, boosting China's image everywhere.
And it wasn't just soft power, was it?
Not at all. This was diplomacy, yes, but diplomacy with a very, very big stick behind it. The goal was to spread the emperor's name, his benevolence, but always with the clear, unspoken threat. The threat of absolutely overwhelming military force if anyone dared to question Ming authority or worse, resist it. It was a vision of global supremacy, basically painted onto the oceans.
And to even think about making that vision real, building the fleet needed was just a colossal undertaking. I mean, it's staggering when you think about the logistics.
Yeah.
A true testament to Ming organization and technology. You had these huge shipyards in Nanjing. And we're not talking hundreds of workers, we're talking thousands, tens of thousands maybe, toiling day and night. They were clearing forests for timber, shaping these massive logs into hulls and masts, assembling a navy so vast, so complex, it just must have seemed almost impossible at the time.
Building floating cities, essentially.
Pretty much. And the heart of this armada were these massive ships called treasure ships, the Baochuan. Now, the records, they describe truly staggering dimensions. Some accounts say nearly 400 feet long, maybe 160 feet wide, 9 masts reaching for the sky. Imagine a ship longer than a modern football field, made of wood.
It almost sounds unbelievable.
Well, that's the debate, isn't it? Many modern historians are understandably skeptical. Could wooden ships actually be that big? Would they hold together in rough seas? There are serious questions about stability and structural integrity. And crucially, we haven't found a wreck that definitively proves those exact huge dimensions.
But even the smaller estimates are still huge, right?
It's exactly. Even the most conservative estimates, based on archaeology and maybe more realistic readings of the records, they still put these ships at easily 250, maybe 300 feet long, which still makes them, hands down, among the largest wooden ships ever built, dwarfing anything else on the planet then. And they were technological marvels, too. They had watertight compartments, this brilliant Chinese innovation, centuries ahead of Europe, meaning a hole in one part wouldn't sink the whole ship.
Incredible foresight.
Truly. And like you said, they were floating cities, multiple decks, cabins for officials, huge storerooms, space for hundreds, maybe thousands of sailors and soldiers. Some accounts even mention gardens for fresh vegetables, pens for livestock. Basically self-sufficient fortresses at sea. And the treasure ships weren't sailing alone. They were the flagships for hundreds of other vessels. Warships, patrol boats, supply ships carrying water and food. A whole ecosystem designed to support this massive endeavor. The scale just boggles the mind.
It really does. And when you hear those numbers, especially the potential size, you really need a comparison to grasp it. Let's put it next to those later European expeditions that, let's be honest, get most of the attention in history books. So estimates for Zheng He's first voyage, maybe up to 300 ships, and the crew, nearly 30,000 people. Think about that. Sailors, soldiers, translators, doctors, officials, navigators, all working together.
A massive coordinated operation.
Right. Now, fast forward almost a century, Christopher Columbus, 1492. How many ships? 3. Tiny ones. The Santa Maria, the biggest, was maybe 90 feet long. His whole crew, fewer than 100 men.
That's almost comical in comparison.
It really highlights the difference, doesn't it? Zheng He's fleet just dwarfed Columbus's venture in every single way. Imaginable numbers, size, technology, imperial backing. It was a level of maritime power completely unprecedented. For that moment, China was simply in a different league.
Absolutely. And the goals, tying back to that imperial vision, were just as complex as the fleet itself. Way beyond simple exploration. Diplomacy was definitely key. Zheng, he carried these incredible gifts, silks, porcelain, lacquerware, gold to show Ming generosity and power. And in return, he'd accept tribute. Exotic animals, gems, spices, all symbols that foreign lands recognized China's central role.
Affirming their place in the world order.
Precisely. And trade naturally followed, benefiting both sides, bringing wealth and knowledge back to China. But let's not romanticize it too much. There was a hard edge. The fleet carried thousands of soldiers, heavy cannons. They were ready to enforce compliance if needed. If a ruler resisted, well, Zheng, he had the means to make them reconsider.
So it was about projecting power in every sense.
Yes. Zheng He's mission, given by the emperor, was basically to remake the known world map with China at the center, to stretch Ming influence further than ever before, across familiar seas and into the unknown, creating this vast network of tribute and trade that proved China's supremacy.
Okay, so the vision's clear. The fleet's built. It's immense. And then, 1405, the first voyage begins. Can you just imagine the sight? Hundreds of these massive ships lining the Yangtze River, sails, probably silk, snapping open like thunder, drums beating this deep, powerful rhythm across the water, banners flying, dragons embroidered everywhere. And there's Zheng He on the deck of his flagship, probably the biggest of them all, looking out towards the sea. Behind him, this incredible armada starts to move. Ahead. The unknown ocean. An ocean that for a while would basically belong to them.
It must have been an absolutely awe-inspiring spectacle, unforgettable for anyone who witnessed it.
Their first route takes them south, down the coast, through the South China Sea, which was notoriously full of pirates, and into Southeast Asia, places like Champa, modern Vietnam, and Malacca, that crucial trading hub.
And their presence alone was overwhelming. Local rulers saw this fleet. What choice did they have? They mostly bowed to Ming authority pretty quickly.
Smart.
Definitely. Zheng, he acted as a mediator in local disputes. He put rulers loyal to the Ming in place, secured those vital trade routes. And pirates, any pirates who dared mess with Ming interests were hunted down and wiped out. Efficiently. Ruthlessly.
So it wasn't just waving flags, it was projecting real power, like you said, diplomacy backed by a hammer.
Exactly. The first voyage really set the template. It reached Calicut in India, came back loaded with riches, tribute, and those exotic animals that amazed the court. The second voyage, 1407 to 1409, largely followed suit, but pushed even deeper into India and into the Persian Gulf. It was about reinforcing that authority, especially in key places like Malacca, which basically became a Ming protectorate. Silk, porcelain, lacquerware went out as gifts. Pearls, spices, gems came flooding back.
But the third voyage? That one sounds like it had some real drama.
Oh, it did. 1409 to 1411. This is where we see the hammer really come down. In Sri Lanka, the local ruler, a guy named Alagakanara, made a serious miscalculation. He challenged the Ming, even tried to capture part of the fleet.
Big mistake.
Huge mistake. Zheng, his response was immediate and decisive. Thousands of his troops stormed the capital, captured the king, and brought him back to Nanjing in chains. Now, the Yongle emperor later released him, let him go back, a calculated show of mercy perhaps. But the message across the whole Indian Ocean was crystal clear. Defy the Ming, you fall. Submit, you prosper. That voyage also brought back a sacred Buddha tooth relic, a major cultural coup for Nanjing.
Okay, so established dominance. Then the fourth voyage, sounds like they went even further.
Yeah, it did. 1413 to 1415. This was probably the longest reach. They sailed deep into the Persian Gulf to Hormuz, securing tribute from Arab rulers. But the really big news, they crossed the Indian Ocean to East Africa for the first time. They visited ports like Mogadishu, Brava, Malindi, traded, collected tribute, and they brought back animals nobody in China had ever seen before. Giraffes, zebras, ostriches.
Giraffe, that caused a huge stir, didn't it?
Absolutely massive. The Yongle emperor saw it as a Quilin, this mythical beast from Chinese legends, whose appearance meant prosperity, peace, and divine approval of his rule. His incredible political symbolism, proof of the mandate of heaven.
Wow. Okay, so Africa is now on the map. What about the next ones?
The fifth voyage, 1417, 1419, basically solidified those links with the Western Indian Ocean, Arabia, East Africa, strengthening the tribute network. The sheer size of the fleet left such an impression that even today, you find local legends in some areas talking about these giant ships from the east. The sixth voyage, 1421, 1422, this happened while things were getting a bit strained back home. The emperor had moved the capital to Beijing, built the Forbidden City. Huge expenses.
Starting to feel the pinch.
Yeah, but Zheng, he still sailed, reinforcing Ming presence. There are hints maybe part of the fleet even reached the Red Sea, connecting with Muslim pilgrims heading to Mecca. Shows the incredible reach.
And the final voyage.
The seventh, 1431, 1433. Zheng. He was an old man by now. It was like a grand farewell tour. Back to Hormuz, Arabia, East Africa, shoring up those relationships one last time. And it was during this voyage that he died, most likely in Calicut, India, a place he knew well. They say he was buried at sea. A fitting end, in a way, for the admiral who mastered the waves, though there's a tomb, a cenotaph for him in Nanjing.
So across these 7 incredible journeys, each one pushed the boundaries for China, expanded their known world. It cemented them as the center of a huge network of diplomacy and trade, a global powerhouse. And Zheng He himself becomes this legendary figure. But beneath all the spectacle, you still sense that deeper drive, right? That search for control of the seas, trade routes, knowledge.
Definitely. How far could they go? How much of the world could they bring into their orbit? That seems to have been the underlying question.
Which leads us right back to the mystery.
Exactly. Because alongside all this undeniable success, all this awe, There are these persistent puzzles. We find hints of Chinese presence in surprising places, tantalizing clues that maybe, just maybe, the fleet went even further than the official records admit. So you start asking, were the ships really that big? How far did they actually sail beyond East Africa? And the biggest question of all, the one that hangs over everything, why? Why, after all that, did the Ming just stop? And not just stop, but actively burn the records of their own amazing achievement.
That deliberate destruction.
That's the core of the enigma, that act of choosing to forget. It makes you wonder what they were trying to hide, or perhaps what they were afraid of.
It's like that phrase, fleeting splendor, really fits. All this incredible wealth and knowledge flowed back, but then, poof. Let's talk about what came back first. It wasn't just political influence. Outbound ships carried silk, porcelain, lacquerware, gold, the best of Ming craftsmanship. But the return cargo was just as stunning. Pepper, cloves, nutmeg, sandalwood, pearls, ivory, gems. A global market emptying into China.
A treasure trove, literally.
And the living treasures. You mentioned the giraffe, the zebras, ostriches, camels too. Imagine them being paraded through Beijing. The crowds must have been utterly astonished. And that giraffe's quillin thing, that wasn't just a curiosity. It was powerful propaganda. Proof the heavens approved of the Yongle emperor. Elephants, too, used in grand ceremonies. These weren't just animals. They were symbols of imperial power recognized across the known world.
And it highlights that dual nature again, diplomacy and force, working hand in hand. Because Zheng, he wasn't just collecting tribute in animals, he was enforcing order. Those pirates in the South China Sea, dealt with swiftly. Malacca effectively turned into a Ming naval base controlling vital straits.
And Sri Lanka stands out as the prime example of force.
Absolutely. When the ruler resisted, Zheng, he didn't negotiate further, he acted. Stormed the capital, captured the king. The message was unambiguous. Resistance is futile. Cooperation brings benefits. But it's fair to say, force seemed to be the last resort. Diplomacy, trade, gifts, that was a preferred method. He rewarded loyalty. He only punished active defiance. Strategic restraint, mostly.
Beyond the riches and the politics, think about the sheer intellectual achievement, the navigation, the mapping. It's tragic what happened next. His fleets had top-tier navigators, cartographers, interpreters. They weren't just sailing point A to point B, they were recording everything.
Creating knowledge.
Exactly. Detailed maps of the Indian Ocean currents, monsoon winds, coastlines drawn with a precision that Europe wouldn't match for ages. They documented customs, products, politics, everywhere they went. It was like a massive intelligence-gathering operation.
Way ahead of its time. This knowledge base, understanding the interconnectedness of that whole vast region, it was invaluable. A real strategic asset.
Which makes the next part utterly baffling and infuriating for historians.
Right. Because, as we've hinted, most of these records, this incredible library of global knowledge, were deliberately destroyed. Gone. After the voyages ended, Ming officials, under imperial orders, systematically burned the logs, the charts, the detailed accounts. We're left with fragments, secondhand summaries, shadows. And that destruction, it's not just sad, it's a key part of why there's so much mystery. How far did they really go? What discoveries were made and then erased? How much knowledge about the world, about navigation, about other cultures was lost forever in those fires?
It's an act of deliberate historical amnesia. It's stunning.
It really is. And it fuels so much speculation precisely because the hard evidence was destroyed.
Which brings us right into those echoes of mystery and maybe the biggest point of contention, the actual size of the treasure ships. We touched on it, but let's dig in. Chinese records claim some were 440 feet long, 180 feet wide. Again, that's 4 times bigger than Columbus's biggest ship. Potentially the largest wooden ships ever built, ever.
An astonishing claim.
But the skeptics raise valid points, right? Naval architects, historians, they argue wooden hulls just can't handle that scale. They twist, break apart in heavy seas. Structurally unsound, basically.
It's a compelling technical argument. Wood has limits.
And crucially, no wreck has ever been found that confirms those specific massive dimensions. So the theories fly. Were the records just imperial bragging? Exaggeration?
That's certainly possible. Glorifying the emperor's achievements was standard practice.
Or maybe only a couple of ceremonial flagships were that big, and the rest of the fleet, while still large, was more manageably sized.
Also plausible. But the undeniable truth, no matter the exact numbers, is that the fleet was massive, the ships were huge for their time, far larger than anything else afloat. Even if they were only 300 feet, they were still engineering marvels.
The debate itself just shows how blurry the line is between fact and legend with Zheng He. It feeds the mystery.
perfectly illustrates it, and it connects directly to that wider issue, the lost records, the lost knowledge. Why do we know so little for certain about something so huge, so impactful? The answer is tangled up in Ming Dynasty politics. After Zheng He died around 1433, the political winds shifted dramatically. The Voyages just fell out of favor.
Why, though? What changed?
Several things converged. Renewed threats from the Mongols up north became the top priority. Suddenly, defending the land borders seemed much more urgent than sailing across oceans. Then there was the cost. These expeditions were incredibly expensive, draining the treasury. Many officials argued that money was desperately needed for the Great Wall, for internal projects, not for bringing back giraffes, essentially.
The accountants versus the adventurers.
Kind of. And then you had the powerful Confucian scholar bureaucrats. They always resented the influence of eunuchs like Zheng He. They saw eunuchs as corrupting unnatural power centers and these overseas adventures. To the Confucian mind, they were wasteful, dangerous distractions from the proper business of a self-sufficient agrarian empire. Focus inward, maintain harmony. That was their philosophy.
So it wasn't just neglect, it was active opposition.
Active suppression. Emperor Hongxi, Yongle's successor, canceled the voyages almost immediately. Later emperors ordered the records destroyed, the shipyards dismantled, private sea travel banned, punishable by death. China, which had commanded the oceans, deliberately, forcefully turned its back on the sea. And that deliberate erasure, that choice to forget, that's what fuels the biggest mysteries. What did they know that they decided not to know anymore?
That deliberate void is like an invitation for speculation, isn't it? Which leads to some really out-there theories. The most famous has to be the 1421 theory.
Oh, yes, Gavin Menzies.
Right, the retired British naval officer. His book, 1421, The Year China Discovered the World, made this absolutely explosive claim back in 2002. He argues Zheng He's fleets didn't just go to Africa. He says they reached the Americas, sailed around South America, circumnavigated the entire globe, all nearly 100 years before Columbus or Magellan.
A history-rewriting bombshell, if true.
Totally. And Menzies presents all this circumstantial evidence. Old maps, like the Piri Reis map that he claims show coastlines, especially in the Americas, with knowledge Europeans supposedly didn't have yet. He talks about alleged Chinese-style shipwrecks found in the Americas, DNA traces in some Pacific Islanders, oral traditions from Australia to Africa describing giant ships. It weaves together into this compelling narrative.
It is compelling. It captures the imagination. The idea that China got there first. It's powerful.
But what does mainstream history say?
Well, the overwhelming consensus among professional historians and archaeologists is deep skepticism. The criticism is that Menzies misinterprets maps, relies way too much on coincidence and shaky anecdotal evidence, and crucially lacks hard, verifiable proof. Despite decades of searching, there are no confirmed, unambiguously dated 15th century Chinese artifacts in the Americas. The maps have other explanations. The DNA evidence is complex and debated.
So tantalizing, but not proven.
Exactly. It's a fascinating theory, hugely popular with the public, but it hasn't convinced the academic world because the standard of proof just isn't met. But that what-if factor remains potent. If Zheng He did reach the Americas, it changes everything we thought we knew about the discovery narrative. That possibility, however remote, keeps the discussion alive, keeps that sense of mystery burning.
Okay, so setting aside the really controversial stuff like 1421, even the confirmed reach is pretty stunning and still leaves questions, especially about Africa. We know for sure records and archaeology confirm his fleets reached Kenya and Somalia. That giraffe came from Malindi.
Solid evidence for East Africa. Chinese porcelain from the right period found there, local traditions remembering the ships. It lines up.
Right. But then you start wondering, how much further did they go? Did they round the Cape of Good Hope, that treacherous southern tip of Africa? Did they push into the Atlantic?
And that's where the missing records become so critical. Without the logs, without the charts. We just don't know. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. Speculation runs wild, but certainty. It's elusive. It adds another layer to the enigma. What secrets did those lost charts hold about Africa's coasts or beyond?
Which brings us back full circle to maybe the biggest mystery of them all, the one that just doesn't seem to make logical sense from our perspective. Why did it all stop so suddenly? It's this huge paradox. By the 1430s, China has the best navy in the world, period. They've shown their power across continents. And then they dismantle it. They walk away. Why?
It's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And the answer isn't simple. It's a mix of factors all coming together. We've touched on them. Cost was huge. These fleets were an enormous drain on the treasury, and priorities shifted to defending the northern border against the Mongols, a very real, very present danger. Then the politics. Those Confucian officials gaining influence hated the expeditions. They saw them as wasteful, dangerous, and promoted by the eunuchs they despised. Their ideology favored internal stability, agriculture, self-sufficiency, not risky foreign adventures.
So it was a perfect storm of budget cuts, shifting threats, and bureaucratic infighting, basically.
Pretty much. The inward-looking faction won the argument. It became official policy. Strengthen the Great Wall, focus on internal harmony, forget the oceans. The grand maritime vision was sacrificed for perceived stability at home.
And the consequences of that decision, they were massive, weren't they? Globally massive.
Profoundly so. It reshaped world history. Those incredible shipyards, closed down, left to rot, the treasure ships themselves. Decayed at anchor or broken up for timber, the knowledge, burned. Sea travel was restricted. China deliberately turned inward, focusing on farming and defense. And the historical irony is just staggering. Just as China abandoned the seas, renouncing its position as the world's leading maritime power, European exploration was just beginning. With their tiny ships, comparatively speaking, China essentially vacated the field. The nation that had the capability to dominate global exploration left the oceans wide open for Portugal, Spain, and later others to step in and define the next era of maritime history. It's one of history's great turning points, driven by an internal decision.
That contrast is just so stark when you lay it out. Columbus's 3 little ships, Da Gama's 4, Magellan's 5, struggling ventures, often privately funded, facing huge risks. Then you picture Zheng He, hundreds of ships, tens of thousands of men, the full backing of the mightiest empire on Earth, technologically light years ahead.
No comparison in terms of resources or scale at that specific moment.
Yet, who do we remember? History, especially in the West, focuses on Columbus, Da Gama, Magellan. Their voyages triggered centuries of colonization, global empires. Zheng He's voyages, they ended abruptly, leaving behind this fascinating mystery, this historical cul-de-sac, rather than a continuous legacy of expansion. It's a totally different outcome.
Which leads us right to that ultimate historical puzzle, the giant what-if that haunts the story of Zheng He. What if they hadn't stopped? What if the Ming emperors had doubled down, continued the voyages, built on that incredible foundation? Imagine the possibilities. Permanent Chinese trading posts, maybe even colonies, along the African coast, across the Pacific, Australia, the Americas.
A completely different world, Matt.
Completely. With their power and technology at the time, China could easily have rivaled, maybe even completely preempted European expansion. The entire age of discovery could have been an age of China. The whole trajectory of modern world history might have been different. But the mystery remains because of those missing records. We can only speculate about how far they truly went, what lands they might have reached beyond the confirmed routes. Did they map more of the world than we realize? Was knowledge deliberately hidden or suppressed by the court for political reasons?
Knowledge that could have changed everything.
Potentially. We're left guessing. Did the Ming court decide that knowing too much about the outside world was dangerous? Did they prefer ignorance to the complexities of global engagement? The silence on that front is perhaps the most profound mystery of all.
So, when we look back at Zheng He's voyages, they're this incredible blend, aren't they? A definite triumph of history, a peak of maritime achievement, but also deeply a puzzle of legend, shrouded in missing details and unanswered questions. We know enough to be completely awestruck by the scale and the ambition, but not enough to be certain about the full story. His narrative really forces us to challenge those easy, Eurocentric views of who the great explorers were.
Absolutely. It's a vital counter-narrative.
And it's also just the stark lesson in how fragile history can be, how easily knowledge, incredible achievements can be lost, not just to time or accident, but to deliberate political choices, a decision to forget.
And the image that sticks with me, the one that feels both powerful and haunting, is Zheng He, standing there on the deck of that colossal flagship. You imagine the wind filling those huge sails, a fleet unlike anything the world had seen before or would see again for centuries, his eyes looking out towards horizons no one else even dared to dream of reaching. For that fleeting moment, maybe 3 decades, the oceans really did belong to him, to Ming China. And then, just like that, they didn't.
An empire turns its back on the sea.
Exactly. The waves still carry fragments of his story, though. Whispers across time, from China to Africa and maybe beyond. It's half history, half myth, but entirely extraordinary. The voyages of Zheng He, they remain one of the greatest, most tantalizing mysteries ever to sail across the sea. Makes you wonder what else we've lost, doesn't it?